exposure to materials that we have to be very, very careful about on YouTube.
Feeling more anxious, feeling more depressed, having a more negative outlook, like less trust. These are the effects that can happen from primary and from secondary traumatic stress. It's not a character flaw. It's not a weakness. This is just something that happens.
Do you see those professionals not getting help from their organisations? Do you find that it's difficult for them to discuss that with each other as well?
Many people, as I say, don't have the language. And if you don't have the language for what you're experiencing, then how do you even start to deal with what you're experiencing? For anyone who's listening, who wants to argue in the comments about the definitions, come at me, let's do it. Because you work in a high-stakes environment, it's really important that we do talk about it, but it makes it even harder to talk about it.
Some of it was horrendous, and once you see that stuff, you can't unsee it, and it plays on you.
You can't self-care your way out of trauma. Right? There are no amount of bubble baths or ice baths that are going to remove certain images or certain experiences. I didn't think that I would make that kind of decision, or I didn't think that I would let that kind of thing happen.
No matter how painful the whole situation may well be, you may lose your job, but you've got to do the right thing, because if you do the right thing, then you can live with yourself. Today, I've got a fantastic guest where we are going to go over, what it's like to be in infosec, seeing materials that you don't necessarily want to see when you're doing investigations, how to deal with that, tricks of the trade, which my guest will give to you. But we're also going to be kind of going over some of the stress factors of being in information security in general. It's going to be a fascinating discussion, and let's bring in the guest. In order to discuss these really important matters on dealing with exposure to materials that we have to be very, very careful about on YouTube. So you might see some things being described rather than said exactly what they are, because we've got to be very, very careful because of the algorithm. And YouTube have got a big long list of things we're not allowed to necessarily talk about directly. So I have the fantastic Eve, who has come back to help us understand a little bit more about difficult materials, cybersecurity, people, how to deal with it. The stress of it, obviously, is going to come into that as well. Eve, do you want to just remind everybody out there who you are, what you do, and anything else?
All right, thank you very much. And first of all, let me just say it's lovely to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
It's lovely to have you back as well.
Thank you very much. So yes, I work as a therapist and a consultant, and some of the areas in that work include elements of sports psychology, clinical traumatology, and as well as the joys and the successes, also the wear and tear of going after our personal and professional goals. And if you'll excuse the wordplay, also the malwear and tear when we come to talk about some of the things today. Brief little bit about why I have skin in this particular game. I wasn't always a therapist, and a few years ago I was training in martial arts, and I really wanted to work on the mental and emotional side. So I worked with a good therapist, got good results, and retrained as a therapist, really so that I could do that for myself and then provide it to others. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Because my original training was in international politics, that's the academic training. And so I did very briefly some voluntary and humanitarian work in a post-conflict environment. Now, keeping it all suitably vague, right? So I witnessed some things. So I saw some things happening to people, and I saw people doing things to other people. Mm-hmm. And I heard firsthand accounts of what people had experienced, so adults and children. Mm-hmm. Now, nothing happened to me directly, but nevertheless, things negatively affected me. And the academic training I'd received mentioned nothing about the effects of the work. And I come from a personal background where you don't have feelings. Mm-hmm. And that's as much as a warning as a statement. Right? So I came to this with not very high emotional literacy, we can put it like that. Personal background, not very helpful. Academic training, not helpful. The people around me at the time didn't talk about it. When I worked with that good therapist, they didn't know what to do with the experiences that I'd had. When I trained as a therapist, the foundational training, didn't touch it. And then when I sought out working with a senior therapist, they didn't know what to do with it either. So I found myself like 20 years after the original experiences going, right, this is a problem.
Mm.
People don't have the language, we don't have the tools, we don't have the skills. But by that time, I had enough experience and skills. I had the discernment to be able to go looking for proper answers for myself and then to be able to share it with others, which is how we end up here. Because I often work with people who run towards the fire in one way or another, which is what cybersecurity professionals do. And so many, not all, but many people, as I say, don't have the language. And if you don't have the language for what you're experiencing, then how do you even start to deal with what you're experiencing?
Great intro.
Well, thank you very much.
I've been in InfoSec now, as many of you know, for a long time. And in the early days of my foray into this field, it was a lot less looked at as a career path and more of as a bit of a joke, which was one problem that you had to deal with as an InfoSec professional back then. We weren't even called InfoSec professionals, called IT, security people. That's how old I am. But also, it was at a time when access to the internet wasn't anywhere near as regulated in organizations. We didn't have the technology right in the early days to regulate email content or web content that may or may not be being viewed and distributed around the organization by some of the employees. And we definitely didn't have, as strong as we do now, policies and procedures to be able to handle that. Now, some of it was very jokey stuff that kind of was borderline dubious. Some of it was horrendous. And at some point down the line, every InfoSec professional gets asked to do an investigation as to something that allegedly somebody has been doing or seeing or conducting within that organization, distributing of certain types of illicit materials that are definitely illegal, are things that a lot of us old timers have had to deal with from one time or another. It's a lot harder to do now, and it's a lot more less frequent for that kind of content. But on the other side of things, you also, when you do incident response and you do have to do investigations, at times you have to investigate people you consider friends, colleagues, people that you've worked with very closely for years. And you have to maintain a certain level of objectivity because sometimes they've done terrible things and it gets found out, and then boom, all of a sudden you're providing evidence to remove somebody from their position or, bring the police in to deal with a situation. And you're part of the person, part of the team, or if you're really unlucky, the person who's done a lot of the investigation and has, in essence, really kind of provided the evidence to whomever, which is horribly stressful, especially if you like the individual. But anyway, that's kind of set the scene for what we're talking about today, dealing with that kind of stress. I mean, is there anything you want to add to that, Eve? I've been very careful with what I'm saying here.
Yes. I'll add to the distressing material, because I like a definition, even if it's just a gentle definition, so that we've got some reference points on a map. And so, yes, the exposure to distressing material is when we see, hear, or hear about distressing things that have happened to others. Mm-hmm. And that can be, as you say, material that gets emailed around, mm-hmm. or it can be sometimes if you are actually in person and someone is recounting something to you that they've experienced or that they've witnessed. So that also has the effect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Am I, you deal with a lot more information security professionals talking with them, going through, some of their experience. Obviously, we need to be very vague about that, patient confidentiality, but we can talk in generalizations, I hope. Do you see a lot of cybersecurity professionals in distress over some of the stuff that they have to deal with on a professional level? And I mean, we've already done a video before about burnout. It's one of our most popular videos. And you don't get burnout through significant levels of stress leading up to it, or a really, really significant issue that kind of hits you in the face and is so extreme that it just boom, your head just goes. What are you seeing from the general community? Is this a definite problem? Do you see those professionals not getting help from their organizations, or do you find that it's difficult for them to discuss that with each other as well? Because we are social creatures, and one of the ways we get over distressing things that have happened to us is one of the best ways is obviously discussion, therapy, obviously with somebody like yourself. And now I've just realised I've unpacked a whole plethora of stuff, so I'm going to let you to talk.
Okay. So just a small question.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. If I said there are 3 groups, I'm going to do a couple of things. So if I said that there are 3 groups, and then let's get you and me talking about 3 particular terms, because it'll help frame what we're talking about.
Sounds good.
So the 3 groups, broadly, if we talk about people who are involved with content moderation, for example, so that's an easy, obvious one. OSINT, or research. And then let's go all the way over here to CISOs and decisions that they might be having to make. Before we get into those details, let's get these 3 terms on the table, because it will help differentiate from burnout, because you're right in what you were saying, that these can exist separate from burnout or exacerbate burnout. And one of the things I just want to give a hat tip to the cybersecurity community for is for the genuine courage it takes to talk about burnout. Because you work in a high-stakes environment, it's really important that we do talk about it, but it makes it even harder to talk about it. And whilst burnout is a wonderful umbrella term to start with, it's important to say, it's like saying if I turn up to a doctor and say, I've hurt my leg. Well, what have you done? Sprained your ankle, torn a meniscus? Have you, sprained a hamstring, or are you bleeding from your femoral artery? Right? It all falls into the same thing. So these 3 definitions should help today. And we'll do this via everyday examples. So first thing, and if I ask you something, and it's going to be casual, but if I ask you something and you don't want to answer it, you just pass. Okay.
No, I'm all here. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm going to answer as honestly as I can.
Spot.
Go for it.
So that this is relatable for most people listening, could I ask you please to think about a horror film that you've seen, probably when you were too young to see it, and there is something about it, like there's a detail that's stuck with you, like it's just kind of like a little barb that's got into you, like an image or a movement or a sound, or there's a something.
Well, you picked the right person to ask that question, because I love my horror films, and I did get in way too early.
Right.
It was a different time in the 80s. So I think it was my first ever horror film, and I was definitely below the age of that I should have been, was Poltergeist.
Oh, right.
I loved it, but it scared the crap out of me at the same time. And maybe that's why I'm not so scared of horror films these days, but definitely it was Poltergeist. Do you want a specific scene that really did it for me in there?
Yeah, is there a something? You don't have to say what it is, but like, is there an image or a... Yeah.
It's when the girl's up against the screen and it's snow, and she just turns around and says, they're here.
Oh, yeah.
Cracking scene, but yeah, that's the... I mean, it's in every trailer as well, so I might have been affected over these. Not that I watch a lot of trailers, but yeah, it's that haunting kind of, they're here.
Yes. So I have one from Nightmare on Elm Street, which just, again, far too young to have been watching it, but even just thinking about it now, like the hairs on my arms stand up. Like I get the shiver across the back of the neck.
Yeah.
And so I use this as an example, as an easy way into something that can happen to us called secondary traumatic stress.
Okay.
Which is very much like primary traumatic stress, like what we talk about in terms of PTSD. And this is a good route in because the first thing that happens is we get an intrusive image or an intrusive sense. So you have an experience or you hear about something and it keeps coming back involuntarily.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about horror films. It didn't happen to us. It's not real. And we know it's not real. And yet still, there's a something that happens in us. So we're not going to dive headfirst into a therapy textbook, let me just reassure everyone, but just to map things. So there's something intrusive that's distressing in some way or uncomfortable. So we try and avoid it. So we've got intrusion and avoidance. So if there's something to do with like a car crash, we might feel less inclined to drive in that part of town or during rush hour, or we might not drive at all. So our life starts shrinking. And for the internal experience, to avoid that, we have any substance you care to name, legal or illegal. We have gambling, shopping, risk-taking behavior, just anything that sort of numbs out this. So we've got the intrusion, we've got the avoidance. Then we've got there's a threat in my environment somewhere and I don't know when it's going to happen. So we've got the vigilance and the alertness that comes up, which just in itself is stressful because which you know very well in your profession. And then we get the negative thoughts and feelings that come along with it. So feeling more anxious, feeling more depressed, having a more negative outlook, like less trust. So these are the effects that can happen from primary and from secondary traumatic stress. And one of the important things, at least it was for me, about hearing about this, is that it's not a character flaw, it's not a weakness that you experience this. This is just something that happens. And it can happen just by witnessing or hearing about. It doesn't have to happen directly to you.
You get things hitting you, I find, many years later, and it normally is accompanied by an image that you can't get out of your head or something that you hear. It sounds a bit like PTSD, really, doesn't it? You hear about people who come back from war who they hear a car backfiring and they're immediately back where they were. I mean, it's not obviously as acute as that. Those people have gone through a lot of very, very harsh things that we haven't. But I mean, there have been times where I've had to do investigations on materials that have been being forwarded around that you would consider extreme, like on the very edge of extreme. And once you see that stuff, you can't unsee it, and it plays on you. And you could flick that image away all you like, but that one moment at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're sat there thinking, I just can't get to sleep, it'll somehow get in there and you won't be sleeping for the rest of the night, and you'll be tired and stressed out the next day, especially when the kids get up and you've got to get in their cornflakes and they won't get dressed for school and they're all screaming and shouting at one another and throwing things at one another.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in therapy at the moment. It's quite nice. I find also it chips away at you because it's not just the one thing.
Yes.
I feel sorry for the guys who do have to do review of material where people are being taken to court for distribution of certain types of illicit material involving youngsters.
Yes.
In the police, because they have to see this stuff. They have to investigate. They have to forensically find it. They have to categorize it. And then they obviously have to hand it over for other people to deal with who will no doubt have to go through the similar kind of thing to them. To us professionals who just kind of look after organizations, it will happen. It used to happen all the time, but maybe it will happen once or twice or 3 times, in a particular organization. But for these poor sods, they have to do it every single day. And no doubt, I hope they get help. If you are in one of those roles, please feel free to DM us and tell us whether you're supported. It does chip away at you, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it gets bigger as well.
Yes, and you've hit on something really important there, 2 really important things. Number one, for the secondary traumatic stress, as you say, very much like PTSD, and it's a scale, right? And so you don't have to be having what we would consider to be what war veterans experience for it to still negatively affect you. And it can come from just that one thing, just that one image once that gets stuck. When you say it chips away at you, here's a second term, which you beautifully led us to, is vicarious trauma. So I'll give you an example from my life as a therapist. So a couple of years ago, about this time of year, I'm walking through the park, middle of the day, working day, sun's out, sky's blue, birds are chirping, just lovely. I'm walking along, and on the left-hand side, there are some kids, maybe 9, 10, 11 years old, playing tennis. I assume they're with a school group. And then on the other side of the path is a single adult sat on a park bench looking at the children. Now, I left a pause. What came to mind? What do you think came to my mind in that moment?
Why is the adult sitting there staring at children?
Right. And I did tee you up for that, so thank you for playing along with that.
No, that's fine.
But that's it. It's like there's a set of assumptions that cross my mind because of my work. That in that moment, I was no longer walking through a beautiful park in the sun. It's like, right, now I'm scanning the environment. I'm noting what this person is like. And I'm now living in a different world. And I know that there are therapists, teachers, social workers, and as you mentioned, people who work in the police, even people who sat on a jury once, who, if they can avoid it, will not leave their child with a babysitter, or they will not let them stay over at any friend's house because they know things.
Yeah.
So work interferes then with the rest of our lives because of this vicarious trauma where we see the world differently, like it is framed differently. So that's the second term. And we will pull ourselves out of the pit of how bleak this all sounds in a moment. So I'll just throw the third term in there while we're here. So moral distress or moral injury. Okay, so that is when. So the distress is there are no good choices.
Yes.
You have to make a choice and there are no good choices.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah.
I am so looking forward to asking you about this. So either there are no good choices, but you still need to make a choice, or you know the right choice, but you cannot make it because of often the constraints of the organization. There's not enough money, not in the legal position to do it. You don't have enough authority. There isn't the political will, but there is a something. So this is the distress. And then afterwards, the injury is, I didn't think that I would make that kind of decision, or I didn't think that I would let that kind of thing happen.
Yep.
So you've gone either by what you have done or what you haven't done. You've gone against really deeply held values, or again, you've seen someone else go against deeply held values. And again, the world isn't quite what you thought it was. Now, this isn't for anyone who's listening, who wants to argue in the comments about the definitions. Come at me, let's do it. But academics, we love a little tussle over language. The secondary traumatic stress and the vicarious trauma are fear-based things. The moral injury, this is a different set of things. This is like shame and guilt, and rage and anger and betrayal. So this is this cluster of things. So this, we deal with this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to bat it back to you. You said that you were familiar with the issue of no good choices and what to do.
I was once on a client site many years ago, many consultancies ago. It wasn't one of my customers now. I mean, it was one of my first consulting roles quite early on, even before I was at the Financial Times, just to put it out there, just in case the lawyers are watching. On that client site, I found material in the email server when I was installing some software that would seek out and find such kind of material. I had to leave the client site and call the police because the managing director, who I originally went to when I first found it, didn't want to tell the police what I'd found.
Right.
I had to balance up, well, this is a client of my boss, my boss being the organization I worked for at the time. And this is the kind of material that I can't not take action on. I felt very strongly about it then when I didn't have kids. I feel even more strongly about it now I do have kids, because so I left site and I called the police and I shot a lot of them in. And then I had to have a very difficult conversation with my boss and my boss's boss as to what happened. They were actually quite supportive. One of them was a bit angry at first, but when I put context in, because I didn't want to have that conversation out in the street,
Mm-hmm.
luckily the higher up saw it from my point of view and said, "Good for you. We lost a customer, okay, but we stopped materials and potentially harm happening to somebody who shouldn't be harmed out there," which I was very proud about. But it was a very tough decision when you're there in your mid-20s and you've not dealt with that.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of guts to do it, particularly when you have added responsibilities. So if, for example, you're the only breadwinner
Mm-hmm.
and you need to keep the job, and you think that if you report or if you whistleblow for something, then that might be you out of a job.
That's true. That particular scenario, and there's been several other scenarios kind of similar, people I would consider friends doing things wrong, not quite as bad as that, but having to investigate and kind of report back and stuff like that. And what all of that has taught me is I'm there to do my duty.
Yes.
And if I can protect somebody in the as part of that, great. I hope that I've done my little bit, whatever that little bit was, especially with that material that was found on that client site. That was a no-brainer in many respects for me personally. Now, for other people who are maybe a little less sure, a little bit more anxious, they would have found that very, very difficult, and they might have frozen in the moment. But I called the police before I even called my bosses. I didn't even give them the chance to decide for me what was going to happen.
Yes.
And it taught me that, at the end of the day, you've got to do what's right. No matter how much it hurts, no matter how painful the whole situation may well be. You may lose your job, you may whatever, but you've got to do the right thing, because if you do the right thing, then you can live with yourself. But what you can't live with yourself is if you, it's that, do you take action or do you risk inaction? I'm not an inaction kind of guy. It might take me a little while to get there, and don't get me wrong, I'm no angel over the years. I've got my own skeletons in my closet. I'm not going to discuss.
I was not going to ask.
No, I'm talking to the few people out there who are going to comment and DM me. What are these terrible things that you've done? Or I know what you've done. Yeah, okay, well, none of us are angels. We've all got skeletons in the closet. But on the mainstay, I think, the mark of a good information security professional is somebody who can do their duty to them, no matter the personal cost or the cost of what it has to the organization, because it's right and it's the right thing to do.
Before going to OSINT and research and the complexities that come up there, I would like to share something that I've taken from the language and the approach of cybersecurity that I've used in a sort of a whistleblowing situation. So there was something that, again, being very vague, that I came across that I had to do something about. And I did the difficult good things. And when I informed an organization, they did not do what they said they would do, that they should have done. And I made a mistake in assuming they would.
Mm.
So I didn't double check with them. So the phrase from cybersecurity, trust but verify, I've absolutely taken that. So that has been a gift to me. And that is something that I will, from now, take into any kind of whistleblowing or reporting situation. I'll just put that in as an aside and a hat tip to you. One of the moral dilemmas that comes out with research, the question of, I've found some difficult material, some illicit material, which I need to leave there. and I need to not intervene in it, and I need to not report it because I'm tracing something back to prevent later harms or greater harms down the line. So that is a particular difficulty where you know you are leaving harm unaddressed, which some cybersecurity professionals experience. Which kind of?
I've been there.
Oh, you've been there.
Yeah. You don't be in this game for long without going through a lot of this stuff. You're really good, actually. One of the key factors, I love the whistleblowing thing, by the way. One thing that I recommend anybody out there, always have a whistleblowing policy and always make it so you protect the whistleblower. Yeah, this is a technique that has been used in instant response to kind of trap somebody and find out exactly what's going on. One of the big problems when you're doing security reviews, instant response, whatever you want to term it, is you're not always sure what the story is. Every incident has a story behind it, and it's important to learn the story. And sometimes where you think maybe, say, a salesperson, here's a good example. A salesperson is potentially looking to leave, and you start noticing that they're logging in at funny times of the night. You then look at the CRM logs. You suddenly see, they're starting to access a lot of files that aren't associated with them. They're starting to download a significant amount of data, and this slowly builds up a picture and a story as to what's going on. It's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. You don't know if the cat is dead until you look inside the box.
Yeah.
And sometimes what you have to do, if you're only getting half the story because you catch something potentially quite early, it's actually better to stop and watch what the individual does. Heighten your monitoring, keep track of a little bit more, and then build that story. Because when you inevitably come to the end of that story and you write up your incident report, potentially it's going to go to court. So you're going to have to make absolutely certain that you've got time-stamped, date-stamped, everything that you saw, when you saw it, how you found it, what you did as well. And if you did not disable that user straight away and let them access more CRM, records over the course of the next night, and you validated that it is them logging in with the multi-factor authentication, biometrics, that kind of thing, or whatever, non-repudiation. So you can definitely tell it's not a hijacked account or something like that. That builds your case. And that's a very long-winded way of saying, no, you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to leave it there.
Yes, I'll broadly call that like the duty to report. And when you do that, the example you gave, because you have quite a large degree of control over what you're doing there, so you have a lot of choice over when you intervene, you get to make your case in it. And I'm just going to compare and contrast that briefly to people who do content moderation, who are really at the sharp end of exposure to difficult material, because it is relentless and horrific. And it's also, if I may be so bold as to say, I think it's probably unsolvable, because you can't be exposed to that kind of material and that volume over time and think it's not going to harm you. The harm is inevitable. I think it's very interesting seeing the court cases at the moment over the last few years, where you have Meta and ByteDance, and Verizon as well is involved in some of it, trying to argue over and trying to really tease out who is responsible and who bears the brunt and what compensation is needed, how much informed consent is needed. And if you go into a job knowing it's going to hurt you, then what does the employer have as a responsibility to protect you? Very tricky situation.
That is a tough one. And if you are expected to do something consistently and ongoing where you are moderating, observing large amounts, see, this is the difficult thing. This does strike home a tad. Because I know a few people in my history who became what they hated. They were exposed to a lot of kind of very dubious content, and then it was discovered years later that they themselves had become enamored by that content. I'm not going to really go into any great detail there, because people know who I'm talking about. The people who I'm talking about will know that I'm talking about them, and don't want to Don't want to go down that route. There's been a few, though. And I do think that there's burden on the organisation if you're going to be putting people into that position, that you do engage somebody like yourself, to be on call or available for them to be able to talk through what they've experienced. It's the same way that in the police, when you do certain jobs within the police, you're assigned a psychologist, especially if you're undercover, deep undercover, where you're dealing with people who are trafficking powder or, engaged in utilizing force multipliers to make sure that people are deleted. You can't act. Weirdly enough, it goes back to what you were just saying. You can't act there and then. You have to gather evidence. You have to get them into a position where you can then arrest them. But that has a psychological toll, because there's been plenty of people. I do a lot of reading because I don't sleep a lot anymore, which is an entirely different thing. But there's a lot of people who go native. That's what it used to be termed as. Where 1 minute they're in with the gang gathering information, but then they suddenly somehow something switches and they become part of that group, and they start to have relationships potentially with people, or they get really friendly with people, and then they can't do their job because they're kind of too deep. They're in it too deep.
Yes.
And I think infosec professionals, because we traditionally have been very solitary within an organization, either a small group or individual, we don't have anywhere to turn to talk to about some of the stuff that we have to handle. And I'm not talking just about the difficult material, but the stress as well. I mean, every role has its stresses. If you're a financial director or a sales director. I mean, look at sales. I mean, that is about as stressful as you could feasibly get in some respects, because if you don't hit your targets, you're out on your ear.
Yeah.
I think organizations should take that into account. And we are getting better at it. I do see a lot more HR departments now being a lot more responsible. I mean, back when I was in my early 20s, everybody kind of knew HR was there to protect the organization from the employees, not the employees from the organization. But that has changed a lot now. I mean, my own HR director spends most of the time telling me stuff that I can and can't do. So, but anyway, passing it back to you.
Yes.
I mean, do you see higher levels of stress and, I don't want to say burnout, we've already done burnout, but, the consequences of stress in cybersecurity professionals, because they're solitary, they deal quite a bit with the possibility of losing their job, even a minor thing happening, finger pointing, being told where to go, obviously, because people don't want you walking into a meeting and telling them they have to do some crazy thing like, pen test that web app before it goes live. God forbid anybody, left some vulnerabilities in there. Do you see cybersecurity professionals really, really suffering from that? Is it higher or is it lower than other professions that you've dealt with?
The stress is high. There are lots of factors that combine to make it more difficult. As you say, it's high stakes. So it's high stakes, high stress, and trauma involvement as well. So if I just point to a therapy textbook for a moment, we're not going to even open it up, but there's complex stress, right? So we've got you, the task, and the environment, right? So you, the job, and the workplace. And I think your sales example is excellent, because that can be really high stress, but it's probably not traumatic. You're probably not viewing particular material. You're probably not investigating your friends. You're probably not at risk of losing a community if you don't hit your targets.
Just your job.
Yeah, I mean, that small thing, But but the trouble when you've got the stress and the trauma or the moral distress happening is that the kind of resources that you would use to help you with one thing are being taken up by the other thing. Right? So on the one hand, you can't self-care your way out of trauma. Right? There are no amount of bubble baths or ice baths that are going to remove certain images or certain experiences. right? But there are nevertheless some of the what we tend to classify as the sort of the resilience stuff, the positive resilience stuff, that can be helpful with some of the stresses, but it doesn't solve some of the problems and some of the experiences. Let's talk about some of the things that are helpful. Should we do that? Should we change the energy a little bit?
I mean, very quickly there, I mean, it's an interesting fact. A lot of people don't know this, but about 12 years ago, I had a seizure. I was in a Thai restaurant. I just sat down. I'd literally drunk that much of my beer. I was with a friend at the time. We'd been given the prawn crackers that you're given with a bit of chili. And I started to, I literally had a little bit of a prawn cracker, which I've had millions of times before and since, and it has not had the same effect. And I started to feel a bit ill. And then apparently I seized and I headbutted the guy behind me who got up to beat me up, obviously, as you do when somebody nuts you from behind. Luckily, his missus was a nurse, apparently, and realised what was happening. And I woke up a little time later with the paramedics there, and they were asking who I was, do I remember who I was, and so on and so forth. Checked my heart, everything was fine. Ended up with MRI and a load of other stuff afterwards. That's all by the by. And they knew I had a seizure because when you have a seizure, you lose certain faculties. Going to the toilet becomes very easy. Look at it that way. But I found I lost massive chunks of my 20s and my teens from my memory. Bits of it have come back, but weirdly enough, I remembered my work stuff.
Oh.
But afterwards, and this is why I'm saying this, I wasn't affected by my childhood experiences because I didn't remember them.
Right.
I still remembered, obviously, how to talk. I still remembered who my parents were and my sisters and so on and so forth. But there were significant parts of my memory that were gone, like at school. I didn't remember who my friends were at school. And over time, I've been reminded of a few things. People come up to me, which is weird when they come up and say, "Hi, Jim, how's it going?" Who the F are you? "Oh, I went to school with you, don't you remember?" And then I have to explain to them. But, obviously don't have a seizure to remove those horrible memories you have. It's like the poltergeist thing. That's weirdly enough, that's one thing that still sticks with me. But I don't remember a lot of the rest of it. So don't follow my example and have a seizure, but there are ways to completely erase parts of your history.
There are, and yes, that is slightly further down the list than one would want to get to. That is fascinating. Might that have been to do with stress? Was stress a contributing factor?
It might have been. I'd just gotten out of, I just split up with my wife. So there was elements in there, but I wasn't stressed at that particular time. If anything, I was actually kind of coming out of a very dark period. It was about 7 months after it was about a year after I split with my wife, and I'd moved in with my mate, and we were doing what you do when you're in your late 30s and you find yourself free again, which is go out down the pub and spend a lot of time just chilling out. But it was the early days of Razorthorn as well, so I was busy and it was all good. Probably more relaxing than the months before the split, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
I won't go into detail, but
all right.
But
noted.
At the end of the day, no, I mean it's really interesting what you're saying, because that was how there was a lot of experiences that I'm not affected by anymore because I don't remember them.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're talking about InfoSec professionals. That was an extreme.
Yeah. Yes. And there are certainly, so let's work back up the chain, right? So from the severity of that, which we are not recommending to the populace if it can be avoided, there are some, I'm not going to talk about therapy more than this paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the techniques that will be used in therapy can be things that, so you have the facts, so you have the experience, right? So you have the facts, but they change the meaning of the facts. So they change the story that you make from the facts. So if there is an image that's particularly triggering, for example, going back to our horror film example, we can sort of desensitize that image. So it might still come back, but you end up with a sort of a shrug shoulder rather than a vigilance response to it. So it sort of changes the nature of the memory, but the memory's still there. That's just my segue from losing all memory to having a memory which isn't quite so triggering. So coming specifically to what we can do, let's get really practical first. If you are looking at, and you're looking at a lot of difficult material, so I'll just stick with the example of content moderators or people who do a lot of research in this area, I'm actually going to ask you the reverse question. All right, if you wanted to make a really immersive experience for someone, when you think about the sound and the images, what would you do to make something really immersive?
Oh man, you're talking to somebody who does a lot of live action role play and over the years and Dungeons and Dragons and what have you.
Right.
And
Yes.
I can put you through several situations where things have gotten a bit too real. Best example of putting somebody into a situation where it becomes real. Me and my mates did an event, zombie apocalypse event. It was in Fort Widley in Portsmouth. Now, most people might not have seen those forts up there, but you've got a parade ground and then you've got a couple of miles worth of tunnels underneath. And the tunnels are in many respects, very badly lit. And we were in the game for 48 hours. There was no going out of game.
Wow.
We were all soldiers. So we all had the gear. We all had the airsoft weaponry mainly, but no airsoft stuff in. The scenario was we were being sent in to find out why a medical facility had gone dark. Very stereotypical.
Love it.
Consequently, yes, it was zombies. But for a good chunk of the 48 hours, and one of the things that the organisers said was after 24 hours, people don't come back in as new players. They go to the zombie team. It was done on the weekend of fireworks night. So Portsmouth was lit up with fireworks on the horizon and bangs and what have you. And we were sent into those tunnels. Our batteries ran out on our lights. We were crawling around in the dark. People were shuffling down in character. We had one guy who was a makeup artist for film who'd done them all up to look properly dead, to the point where on the second day we were dragging one of the zombies, one of the actors, off this particular guy who he'd leapt on, and he tore the prosthetic he had on his stomach, which flopped guts out on this guy's face. But it was all strawberry bootlaces, syrup, and red and colour dye. And this person screamed like you've never heard. But yeah, once you're down in the dark and you've not slept and you're not in a situation where, you know, you remember that it's a game, instinct kicks in. There's an instinctive reflex and you stop seeing it as a game. You don't even think it's a game anymore. It's survival, you know, especially when you're down there. I mean, I went down there with gloves because I knew I've done games down there before, and I knew it was a bit hot, wet and damp and a bit harsh if you didn't have light down there. So I had gloves, just leather gloves. I wore through the fingertips, crawling out of the tunnels because it was so dark. You couldn't see anything. You didn't want to turn your lights on because you were running out of batteries. We were robbing one another as people died in character for provisions, because we were burning through our provisions too quick because we didn't prepare. And I learned a very valuable lesson. Preparation is everything, and take two of everything, if not more.
Yes.
But that's a very long-winded one. But you can put people in scenarios and in situations where it stops being a game anymore, and you can put them into the mindset of who the character is.
Yes.
I think doctors do it a lot with disassociation from the people, surgeons specifically. I did work in a hospital for a while. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember that doctors were always being accused of kind of not caring.
Right.
As I explained to people over the years, the reason why they do that is they've got to, because if they cared about everybody and bad things happen to people in hospitals, let's be honest, you're never going to make it. It's changing perception to be able to do what you need to do and go around it all the way back from that very long-winded thing. I think InfoSec people have to develop some of that.
Yes. There is a term, again, more from the therapy side, and I'm sort of reluctant to ever use the term compassion because it sounds a little bit soft and a little bit soppy, but there's this thing called compassion satisfaction, which applies to anyone who considers what they do to be helping. And so compassion is I care about it and I can do something about it. Like this matters, and what I do about it matters. And so when we're talking about the competence, it's the emphasis on the competence rather than the caring that you're talking about in terms of surgeons and InfoSec, and also therapists and the rest of us.
Therapists, I was about to say, yeah. You know, I discounted you entirely as a profession there. I apologize.
No. It's an interesting overlap that we have. It's no good for anyone if a therapist sits down and cries over whatever you're talking about. Is actually pretty much detrimental if that happens. Most of the time, there are some exceptions. But the emphasis is on, all right, what do we do about it? So the competence element of it. Now, what you were saying about the immersion, because that was a beautiful description of it. So I'll pick out a couple of things. There was a lot of shock going on there, like the shock of the fake guts coming and the bangs of the fireworks. And so if someone is dealing with viewing a lot of difficult material, there are practical steps you can take to make it less shocking and less difficult on the system, some of which will undoubtedly be obvious to some people listening and watching, but just in case it isn't for others, what can you do to blur things out? So there are certain apps like Blur, Blurry, Private Peak that blur things out. You have like a letterbox size for the cursor so that you can actually just only look at some things. Grayscale, so that you don't get the shock of the different, like the contrasting colors, like a shock of red, for example. Yeah. If you can have it on mute, great. So you don't get, for example, like you had the scream that stands out. And if you can't do mute, turn it down. There'll be tools that you can have that like take the edge off things that cut off after a certain pitch.
Yeah.
Slow the frame rate.
Yeah.
That's also good.
I can see that.
And if you can control it, if there's as much as you can control as possible, then do that. Basically, you want to take away anything that shocks, anything that isn't going to be in your control. That sounds familiar, those kind of things?
Yeah, actually. And to be totally honest, I wish I'd had those kinds of tools when I was doing it, because you're absolutely right. It's a combination of different things that you're seeing in that and hearing and witnessing in that image. And you don't need to see all of it either. You can pretty much tell what's happening in the first couple of seconds. If it's obviously if it's really, really bad, you don't need to go through the whole thing. Turn the damn thing off and just do what you need to do from there. Call the police or speak to your boss or speak to somebody or whatever. But I like the idea of, like, if you are doing this a lot, muting out the color, definitely. Like old black and white photos. If you look at black and white photos of crime scenes, they're not as shocking as the color photos that you see of crime scenes, because obviously you don't get the full color spectrum that you're seeing in the color. I can see that. That's really good. What help is there out there for people who might be hitting the limit of the levels of stress they can deal with? Maybe they deal with this kind of content day in, day out. They don't feel that they're getting maybe the assistance from the organizations they work for that they should do, or maybe you're a CISO who has been through a whole host of security events, which has pretty much destroyed your nerves. What resources are there out there? Because you're part of a group now who are starting to address this, and I really, really want to spend the last couple of minutes for you to kind of tell the people out there who they are and how they can get help from them. Obviously, you could reach out to me or Eve directly through the DMs or whatever. We'll point you in the right direction. But if you want to kind of go direct, tell us a bit about this organization. It's you and Beck, isn't it? And probably a number of other people.
Yeah, there are a number of other people. And thank you for that. So there's an organization, a foundation called the Mental Health and Cybersecurity Foundation, set up by, I should give them their credit. So Saab Sembi, Paul Sim, and Peter Olivier are the founders of it, and the team is growing. And it is there to help address, as we've spoken about before, burnout and all the different kinds of stresses like we're talking about today, and to create some kind of community and like gathering resources, gathering experience. So it's really like a member-led organization, if you like. But it's trying to, how do we gather all the experience before people have to leave or before they get to that point, and you lose all the vast experience of all these people who have just had it, had it. So yes, that foundation is there. Do get in touch. But just before we leave, let me give a couple of things that people can do. Most of the things we've spoken about are demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want is to re-moralize, which I don't think is a word, right? But there's a thing called moral elevation. Thank you very much. We've done it here. There's a thing called moral elevation. The important thing about moral elevation is we actively look for people doing good things, right? So, we were talking about vicarious trauma, all the stuff we see, which is awful. So this is the yes and. Yes, there's all this awful stuff. And there are all these people doing good things. And if I can see people doing good things, I might feel encouraged, courage being a key part of that, to do good things too. And if you can do good things with good people, it doesn't cancel all this out, right? But it enriches and it gives us something like that remoralization to give us more energy, to increase our perspective so that we can carry on, so that we can spend good time with good people doing good things. And that is what it comes down to. And it changes our perception of ourselves as well. So let's say with the moral distress and moral injury, let's say that we didn't live up to our own standards. Here's an opportunity for you to climb back up in your own esteem. You do a good thing and you do a good thing. And you just change the odds, like you change the balance. So that's something I would leave people with. And so whether it's a community you already have, whatever community of practice you have, and it can just be, do you have a best friend at work? Like, do you have a mate at work who you can do good things with, who understands? And you don't necessarily have to talk about it, but you can be with each other knowing that you're both going through things and you can do good things together.
Absolutely. I mean, we're lucky at Razorthorn because we're all not all of us are security professionals who deal with this. Luckily, my younger guys have not had to deal with this kind of stuff on a great deal. More often than not, few incidents that crop up these days are normally I do. But we are very supportive of one another here. And we, fostering a culture of support within any organization is really important. It's very difficult to do when you're a very large organization. But if you're a medium-sized or a small-size organization, most of the problems that crop up in the people politics side of things comes down to communication and teamwork and camaraderie. And you're always going to have arguments, recognize that you always will. But you can support one another. And it's the same with InfoSec people. If you are finding that you're on your own, become part of the group that Eve's with, or just reach out to other security professionals. The one thing I will say very positively about most InfoSec people, not all, I'll be honest, but most, is we've all been there and we've all done it and we've all got the war stories, and we are very good at sitting down and talking to one another. And finding small groups and communities. I get on very, very well with loads of InfoSec professionals. I mean, at InfoSec the other day, I was there with some of my competitors just having a chat. Just because we compete in business doesn't make us, doesn't need to be arses to one another.
Yes.
We're all here. We're all doing the same job. And it is supportive. And they were very supportive because they've seen and also done similar kind of things that I've had to do. But equally, I'm starting to think more and more people should be seeing people like yourself, Eve, because I think there's a lot of people out there with a lot of I'm concerned about, because I don't think that they are getting the help. And when you see what somebody looks like after 30 odd years of not being listened to, not being cared about, and having to deal with this kind of stuff, it's not a pretty sight.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't.
I think that's important to know. Yeah.
It doesn't. Sometimes you wonder who those angry guys are at the end of the bar, who are in their sort of like late 50s. They're probably InfoSec people.
You down one end and the grumpy therapists down the other.
Oh, I'll have a beer with you anytime, Eve. No, I at the end of the day, I think it's really, really good what you've outlined here, and just over an hour now, which is slightly longer than we normally do, which just goes to show how interesting and involved it is. We need to revisit this, maybe do a few of these if you're up for it, and we'll get Beck
Absolutely.
and a few others on who have either experienced it from one side of the fence or help people like yourself and Beck and the institution, foundation that you've created, because it is important. Get help and, recognize when you need help as well, which is actually probably more difficult.
We will absolutely come back to that.
That's a good one. That's a good round two. How to recognize when things are getting bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Eve, as usual, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I can honestly say, I think I'm going to be asking you to come on again. I think there's a lot to explore here. I think it's very important. Where can they find you if they need you, Eve?
Oh, eveparmiter.com.
There we go. Please feel free to reach out. Fantastic professional who really knows the stuff. Hopefully you have seen that over the course of this video. And the burnout video that Eve was also on, I do urge you to go and see that. That's one of our more popular videos as well. Thank you, Eve. And to all of you out there, have a great time. Look after yourselves. Look after each other, more importantly. And, if there's anything you want us to cover specifically, if there's any other content you want us to do, if you want us to expand a little bit deeper into some of the aspects of what we talked about today, then please get in touch with us via DM or comment or whatever. And please, please, please feel free to subscribe and like the video. It's great for the algorithm. We've been getting more and more subscribers every single day, and only 80% of you watching the videos are actually subscribed. So we've got significantly more out there than subscribed. So please, please, please feel free to subscribe as well. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.